Now, we've got an epic week ahead in politics, so let's get stuck in. Could this be the Labour Party's darkest week? And are we headed for a winter of discontent? Well, tomorrow, Sir Keir Starmer faces the first major rebellion of his premiership as MPs are to vote on scrapping the controversial pensioners' winter fuel allowance. Now, this comes as tomorrow will also see a mass release of prisoners back onto the streets, 2,000 being released, in fact, tomorrow, which shockingly includes a high proportion of domestic abusers. And if things couldn't get any worse for the Prime Minister, the law enforcement agency at the forefront of Sir Keir Starmer's plan to smash the gangs is said to be in crisis, putting at risk its ability to take on people smugglers and other organised criminals. Well, that's a lot to get stuck into, so let's get started. I'm joined now in the studio by GB News political editor Chris Hope. Chris, I said at the top of the show, it seems the Labour Party, everybody's lives matter. Black lives matter. Trans lives matter, refugees' lives matter, except old people's lives don't seem to matter. Why on earth are they choosing this as their first hill to die on?
That's a choice which the Labour government would not accept, but there's no question that they are putting at risk pensioners by this change. There was a report, of course, commissioned by Labour Party back in 2017, which forecast that thousands of pensioners could die, could literally freeze to death because of this change. There's apparently 2 million pensioners just above that pension credit line who can't benefit from this pension credit, with the government's trying to expand to make up for the removal of this winter fuel payment. Of course, there's 800,000 still to be signed up. So far, in the past 5 weeks, the numbers signing up for that winter fuel credit has increased by 100% to just 38,000 in 5 weeks, from 18,000 in the 5 weeks before. So we're very low numbers and barely touching the size of the numbers who need to sign up to do this. There is concern, I think, in Labour High Command, although it wasn't raised by any minister at today's Cabinet meeting. No one said, why is this happening? It wasn't in the manifesto. Why are you doing this? Rachel Reeves meets the Parliamentary Labour Party at 6 p.m. tonight. She's a Chancellor. She'll be trying to make the point to these, many of them, two-thirds of these are new Labour MPs, not used to making tough choices in government, and here's a big one. Then Alison McGovern, I can reveal on GB News, will brief members in a mass members phone-in at 7 p.m.
This is the whip around.
Yes, it's a ring round of members, a mass phone call with members. They are seriously worried, I think, about how this is going down on the doorstep. We are a long way from an election, Martin. We haven't even got a Tory leader yet, and yet this has made some real choices here. We might be a long way from an election, but these are memories that could last a long time. People still say now, Maggie Thatcher milk snatcher. That was when I was a boy. You know, that was affected my childhood. That meanness gets we should remind
remembered.
viewers of what it is. That was when she was, of course, the education minister, and she sanctioned the removal of free school milk for children in about 1971. I wonder how old you are, Martin, but it was a long time ago.
It happened when I was 8. So it was 1978, so just before she was Prime Minister. But the fact of the matter is, what I'm saying is that casts a long shadow over her meanness. And I think this feels like it could go the same way. In terms of the revolt, how big do you think it's going to be? We've seen on the front page of papers today scores, 20, 40, 60?
40 is the ballpark figure. Revolt is a funny word. It means not supporting the government, so it means not backing the government, abstaining or being absent without leave. Unlikely to be many voting against the government. You'll have those 6 or so rebels like Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell and others. They will be rebelling, but you can imagine there won't be that many want to have that fight right now. But it's a very big day for Keir Starmer tomorrow. He's off to the TUC conference in Brighton. 2 big unions are saying reverse, it shows leadership. Sharon Graham, who's the head of the Unite Union, a massive donor, says it will show leadership if you do try and reverse on this policy, Keir Starmer.
There's not a whiff of hypocrisy about that, though, as well. I mean, you pointed out 2017, the Labour Party's own report said 4,000 pensioners could die that winter. Energy was much cheaper then. There are far more pensioners now than then, so presumably more than 4,000 people could die this time round, and that's a decision they're taking willingly. The TUC are saying that we should reverse this. They've been campaigning for pay rises for all of their members. Unite, teachers' union, saying that Sir Keir Starmer is picking the pockets of pensioners. They gave 10 billion quid to the teachers and the NHS workers, so your members could get an inflation-busting pay rise. They're part of the problem.
Well, Martin, crucially, those who can work can get pay rises. Pensioners, by their very nature, being pensioners are not working. They're stuck with a fixed income. Later this week, we're likely to see the increase in the state pension by a big figure, by the triple lock. We'll see it announced probably Wednesday, Thursday, and that will be a way for this government to move on from what could be a damaging vote tomorrow and a damaging debate in the TUC. I can see why they're doing it in that order, but it's definitely picking a fight here they didn't really need to have, I think, so early in their time in government.
Do you think a lot of the young MPs you talked about there understand the magnitude of what's about to happen here? Because I'm going to speak to a guy later on from the Pensioner Vote, Andrew David Pinless. He started a grassroots foundation. He's planning to name and shame every single politician who votes for this and to go on an awareness campaign in every constituency across the land to say your MP voted to make pensioners colder and poorer and or worse. Back to my first point, do you think that the shadow that this vote casts could haunt the Labour Party for a long time? It
depends how this winter is. They'll be hoping for a mild winter. If it's a cold winter and if people do start to pass away, very, very sadly, of course, very sadly, if they have to turn off the heating and they can't afford to stay warm and we have tragic consequences, that will be on elements in this Labour government. Already, I put a note out on social media saying that not a single cabinet minister spoke out in today's cabinet against this withdrawal of this benefit, and that's already being picked up by the Tory party because that'll be on them, on this cabinet, for not objecting.
Astonishing. And on a day, if it's not a big day of news already for the Labour Party, tomorrow, of course, is that early release day. 2,000 inmates being released after only serving 40% of their tariff. And the headlines today, again from supportive media like The Guardian, saying domestic abuse survivors will be having sleepless nights. Another bad news day for the Labour Party.
Yeah, well, the government says on that, they say that those who are convicted of violent or serious offences over 4 years inside won't be released, nor will those with coercive control, domestic violence or domestic abuse. But of course, you can be convicted of a different charge, assault and battery, but behind that lies domestic abuse. What's happening is here, and we've seen it on GB News from our viewers, they're getting phone calls from the probation service to say the individual who caused your family such misery you thought was locked up maybe till the middle of next year is now out this week. And many people don't always watch GB News as closely as we do, or watch the news, or aware of what's happening. To them, it's a bolt from the blue. They're trying to move on from a dreadful time in their lives, and here comes the government to say, I'm sorry, we're releasing people early. We heard from Number 10 earlier, they said it's a difficult and tough but necessary decision to take. And they also say, Number 10, that had they not done this, the police wouldn't be able to make arrests. So they're putting it back on the Tory government. But however you see it, the choice is being made here by the Labour government, and it may come back to backfire on them.
What a huge day. And 6 p.m, so all eyes are on that ring around to see what the...
Well, that's an in-person meeting at 6 p.m.
Is it?
Yeah, that's the in-person meeting. The 7 p.m. is your conference call.
And when will you get snippets of...
I'll do my best from 6.
Beautiful stuff. Chris, always a pleasure. Thank you very much, and see you again in the next hour. Let's go back now to speaking about pensions with the pensions expert, Tom McPhail. Tom, welcome to the show. You no doubt heard our exchange there, and the thing that makes this even more astonishing, Tom, is that we learned today that in 2017 the Labour Party briefed against Theresa May's winter fuel cut, which never happened, saying 4,000 deaths could be precipitated by that, and yet here we go now. What are you hearing from pensioners in terms of their worrisome situation about they could be facing a much colder and a much poorer winter ahead?
Well, earlier on you used the phrase the Labour Party have chosen this hill to die on, and it does seem a very curious hill for them to choose to die on. It's not going to save the government more than £1 billion or so, which is a rounding error in terms of the overall national account. You know, they're giving far, far more than that, 10 times more than that away in overseas climate aid. You talked about the settlement of public sector workers. So this is a choice the government is making. And what does it mean for pensioners? Well, for those pensioners just above the pension credit entitlement income level, they're going to lose up to £300 from this. And that's going to really matter a lot, because by definition, we're talking about people who don't have a lot of money, and they're worrying about fuel bills going up already. It's also interesting that we heard the Prime Minister talking about the impending increase to the triple lock, you know, the annual increase to the state pension. Of course, that won't kick in until next April, which is after the coming winter. And in any event, that is simply a cost of living increase. The winter fuel allowance, by definition, is intended to target pensioners above the state pension. So it's an additional payment which is now being removed. It's going to be extremely worrying for pensioners who are looking ahead to possibly a cold winter. We've had a pretty wet summer, so they're going to be very anxious about this. So So I think the Labour Party has chosen a really interesting battle to fight, and they're losing a lot of friends in the process.
OK, Tom McPhail, I'm also joined in our studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. He has a question for you.
Hi, Tom. Just a very quick question. The government says today that so far around 38,000 people in the past 5 weeks have signed up to the pension credit, double the figure in the previous 5 weeks. But the number who haven't signed up for this yet is 850,000 at the last count. Have you worked out if all those 850,000 people signed up for pension credit, would it wipe out the saving of axing the entire winter fuel payment to everybody?
Largely it would, yes, and I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but largely, yes, it would eliminate it. And on that point, Chris, you made it earlier on. Look, the previous pensions ministers, Guy Opperman in particular, went on long campaigns, invested months of their time in trying to boost take-up of the pension credit. So as you say, we've seen a modest uptick in the take-up of the pension credit in recent weeks. It hasn't really shifted the dial. So I think the government are using this as window dressing to say, look, we've done our best to encourage those who are eligible to take up the pension credit. It's not our fault they're not claiming it. If they're not getting their winter fuel allowance as a result, it's on them. It's not our fault. That really doesn't wash because, the definition of madness is to keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. We've been here before and it hasn't worked. It's an extremely bureaucratic process to apply for pension credit. So I think the government really does need to have a look at this.
And Tom, isn't that the point? A lot of old folks struggle at the best of times, with all due respect. I do myself, with things like parking apps, with technology, the interface to get access to these benefits, multi-page, endless questionnaires, confusing at the very best of times for anybody with access to technology who understands their way around all of this. And so it's all fair and well to say, the benefits there if you want them, but it's difficult. It's harder for pensioners to get their heads around this and to get in gear. And so maybe you're right. Maybe this is just window dressing. Yeah,
no, look, this is a well-known dirty secret of the Treasury that they are intensely relaxed about the failure of the take-up of pensioners to claim this important benefit. And I saw that at first hand under the previous governments. I'm sure it's the same. It's true today. Now it's politically awkward for the current government. But the truth is the Treasury has always been pretty relaxed about people not claiming the pension credit because it saves them a couple of £1 billion a year.
Yeah.
Astonishing stuff. OK, thank you very much for joining us, Tom McPhail. No doubt we'll be sharing words with you over the coming days as this vote, inevitably, it seems, goes through Parliament tomorrow night. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much to you, Chris Hope. Always a pleasure to see you in the next hour.